Welcome back to the Hot Dish Podcast. We're here with Eric Giselson, little Minnesota Midwest legend of the sports broadcasting world. Let's go.
Did you call me a legend?
I did. You like being called a legend?
Thank you, young man. You don't even remember me. You weren't even born when I was on the air here in the Twin Cities, but thank you for saying that. That's a great start to Hot Dish Sports.
You know, speaking of hot starts, the Wild have not been off to such a hot start this year. They're 4-4 with one overtime loss, but obviously it was the Bruins, so that's not a terrible overtime loss to have. But if I would tell you, Gis, at the beginning of the year, that we'd be almost 10 games in and the Wild would be tied with Arizona and Chicago, what would be kind of your thoughts around that?
Don't worry about it. It's an 84-game season. Slow starts are slow starts. The Stanley Cup champions are 3 games above 500, the Colorado Avalanche. I think you see a lot of hot stove leagues fold the tents and push panic buttons and start talking about Fleury's over the hill and Fiala's gone and what are we going to do? Where's the help coming from? And I don't know, Cole. I do think that this is a club that has traditionally proven one thing, and that they don't stay down for long. Yes, they may lose some consecutive games, but Dean Evison and the crew have done a wonderful job of stopping that bleeding, fairly reasonably during some skids. And the start was bad, but that trend showed itself pretty early. They went on a 5-game road trip and came back with, I think, a handful of W's. So at one point, a lot of people probably pushed the panic button, but I think if for those who've been around this game and at a high level and had unique looks at it, nobody really pushed any panic buttons internally at XL Energy Center.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. I think it's pretty early to start saying, oh, yeah, the Wild are 21st in goals scored, 19th in goals allowed. Big deal. Doesn't matter. You know, the only thing that I see in the actual team stats, team rankings that kind of stands out to me, and I've noticed watching the games, is we actually have the second to most penalty minutes of any team on the season, just behind the Ducks. Is this something that you think they're going to come around and change, or is this a style of coaching, or just something that is just bad luck? What are you thinking about with the penalty minutes this year?
I think I hearken back to when this happens and a very vocal Dean Evison saying, like, we got to stay out of the penalty box. This is not acceptable. And if you think back, the last handful of years, the Wild's PK penalty kill hasn't been absolutely off the charts. So I think it's a place they don't want to go if they don't have to. I know that the coaching staff wants them to play, tough in-your-face hockey and outwork their opponents every night. But when you're cheating and when you're, stop moving your legs and you're playing lazy and the penalties start stacking up and you take a lot of penalties and get scored upon and a lot of penalty power play goals, I don't think that's the style or the brand or the goal of a team like Minnesota right now.
Yeah, for sure. And, looking forward to, before we get into talking about the Iowa Wild and who we could see coming up or any injuries we're looking at, just speaking of the penalty minutes as well, Kaprizov luckily didn't get suspended the other day. I'm sure you saw the hit. Luckily his stick didn't hit the guy's face. It was Daughtry, right? So
Drew Doughty. He hit Drew Doughty with a glove and not a stick. And by the way, Drew Doughty is probably a top 5, status defenseman in the National Hockey League. So New York's going to look at that and say, okay, that's not a 15th round pick. That's Drew Doughty. And so I'm glad they didn't suspend 97, but I also thought the league made the right choice there.
Yeah, I agree. And, I don't know if you've noticed too, there's been a lot of situations where other players or Kaprizov has been in some fights this year surrounding Kaprizov. They've really had his back. Have you noticed that on the season?
I have. And, candidly, I think in LA the other night when he got into that skirmish, if you're missing people like Greenway and Foligno and, even Brandon Duhaime to an extent, you don't have the equalizer to, keep a lot of that stuff in check. So Kirill has been fighting a lot of his own battles, but traditionally when the Wild are healthy and when the stronger, more, I don't want to call them enforcer guys, but the meteor guys who aren't afraid to jump in, consequently, you're finding other guys who will jump in for Kirill when the Folignos and the Greenways and the Duhaimes are not in the lineup, all out right now with injuries, but, some closer than others and being back. But I do think for sure they're gonna watch 97's backside and keep him safe, because we all saw what happens when he doesn't score. We all saw what happens when, he's not having a great night and he's getting roughed up. And I think the Wild's number one goal is to make those the the exception and not the norm.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned Duhaime too. He's out on the IR right now with upper body injury. We've got Ryan Hartman's on the IR, same thing, upper body.
I'm hearing
Foligno.
Hartman's longer. I'm hearing Hartman
Really?
is longer. He's the longest one out. I think Foligno could probably play tonight in Seattle. I don't think Duhaime's going to be quite ready. And I think Greenway could play tonight too. So automatically you got two guys over 6 foot, 3, 4, 5 inches tall. They're back in the lineup. And that bodes well for what we were just talking about with Kaprizov.
Yep. And are there some guys from Iowa you think that could be coming up to replace? I know they just called up Adam Beckman.
I think they're all here.
Yeah.
If you talk about Rossi is permanent this year, but he was that Iowa guy last year that everyone wanted to see. Boldy broke onto the scene last year, and I think what's happening a little bit with Boldy and Rossi is Boldy comes up here and lights it up immediately. Rossi's still kind of finding his way a little bit, but that was the two superstars, last year from Iowa. Now look how good Kalen Addison is back on the blue line. Kalen Addison was just waiting for that opportunity. You go back to now it's Cramarosa, Mason Shaw. Both of them have been called up recently from Iowa. And both of them have points already. And so the reason I say the cupboard's a little bare in Des Moines is because half of their roster, not half of their roster, but a good half dozen of them have been on that 35 interstate up and down pretty regularly here. So, and I actually want to compliment the Wild organization for having a cupboard to draw from, because if you look at Mason Shaw and Cramarosa and Kalen Addison stepping in this year, that's some pretty quality minutes and some pretty quality hockey players that Bill Guerin has finally pulled the trigger on and made Minnesota their home. And that's a credit to, the organization, top to bottom. I think that's a strength of the Minnesota Wild, a very good AHL affiliate in Des Moines.
I agree for sure. And as you mentioned, Shaw, he's been one of my favorite call-ups of the year, other than obviously Rossi and seeing Addison full-time out there. But Shaw has been killer. He's played only an average of about 12 minutes a game, and he's got, 8? He's got 4 points in 8 games. That's not bad. 2 goals, 2 assists,
He's a heart and soul guy, and if you know his story, I think it's 2 or maybe 3 ACL surgeries in recovery. So he's false started. He's false started 3 or 4 times in his hockey career, and for sure, if there was a Bill Masterton tough, perseverance award candidate, if he would happen to stay up, in the bigs for the rest of the year, he's quite a comeback story, and he has been that little spark and little tank engine that can for Minnesota at a very timely time.
Yeah, for sure. His first goal was pretty emotional. You could tell for him. And
he's a farm kid from northern Alberta or Saskatchewan, one of the Midwestern provinces of Canada. Comes from the farm, works his tail off, doesn't expect much. He's a lunch bucket player, and doesn't take anything for granted, doesn't take anything easy. And he's proving to be a driver, not a passenger, at the National Hockey League level, and that's pretty impressive with the limited amount and the sample size we've seen at the NHL level.
Yeah, for sure. Every single game that he's racked up a point in, the Wild have won. So if that says
anything, that right?
Yep.
So he's that guy.
He might be that guy this year. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And do you think it's possible that we see, former Gopher come up this year, Brock Faber at all? Is that possible? I know he's only 20.
Well, I guess it's a possibility. I do know, because I have the last 2 or 3 years spent a whole lot of time watching the American Hockey League, and if you get a guy like Boldy and Rossi to go to Iowa or go to the Coralville affiliate, which is their ECHL affiliate, just a few hours south of Des Moines, so strategically located affiliates, National Hockey League's a big jump. I mean, Boldy was a freak of nature. Boldy was ready. I think he played a dozen games in Iowa. Rossi, I think everyone was clamoring for him up here in Minnesota last year. Billy Guerin is traditionally known for not rushing along draft picks, sometimes, according to hot stove leagues, to a fault, but it usually bears out. Marco Rossi was not ready last year in Iowa. To say that Brock Faber could just, be a Gopher and then be a Wild guy, I think you'd see him get a pretty healthy dose of Des Moines before you'd see him in St. Paul, other than the traditional play your first game before you go to the minors at the big club so they can showcase him a little bit. Great talent, great kid. Bobby Moscow tells me he's just really a special guy on and off the ice. He's a character guy. He's going to fit right into the culture of Minnesota. I have no doubt about that.
That's awesome. I love that. Have you been impressed with Rossi this year and what you've seen from him?
Candidly, I was wowed by him in maybe, a dozen games in Iowa, especially last year. I think he really turned a corner. He was ready. And keep in mind now, he's coming off that myocarditis. I'm no doctor, so I can't even pronounce it. It's the complications from COVID that affects your heart. So he, they nurse him back from that for a season, and then he turns corners, and then he sticks this year. It's the same thing. Have I been impressed with him at the AHL level? Absolutely. Have I been wowed by him at the NHL level? I think we're going to see him getting used to the NHL style of play and the pace like he did in the American Hockey League, and that's going to bode well because he is an unbelievable talent at the AHL level. Now it's up to him to be a driver and less than a passenger at the NHL level.
Yep, I agree. And no matter who you are, whatever team, whatever league you're going up, you start playing with new guys, new coaches, everything. That takes some time, and we can't expect that in the first 10 games.
You're 100% correct. And that gets you back to your favorite question. It is a million miles from college hockey to the National Hockey League. In terms of obviously there's some exceptions, but I would be surprised to see him make a big quick splash in the Wild. Keep him here at a National Hockey League level without getting him plenty of seasoning. The guy in Iowa that I would love to see maybe that I think really coming along is former UMD Bulldog Nick Swaney. He's from Lakeville. Swaney played a couple of years, won back-to-back national championships for my alma mater, the Bulldog, the little D3 school north of Toby's, as we like to call it, that all they do is win national championships. But obviously they're having a down year this year, so I'll quit while I'm ahead. But Nick Swaney,
it's early.
Nick Swaney is a really, really good hockey player. He's got a big body. He can bump. He can grind. He's a Billy Guerin type style. And I think he's better than most people really know about right now because I see him pretty regularly down on the AHL level. And I love that kid. And I think he's going to get a cup of coffee up here and a chance like, a handful of other of his teammates are getting right now. It's like the Shaws and the Cramarosas to really, catch somebody's eye at this level, right?
Yeah, for sure. That'd be exciting to see. No doubt.
Yeah. He'd be a dark horse guy. He'd be a dark horse guy from Iowa. Nick
and you
Swaney.
Don't think they wouldn't do just the call him up, give him a game or two and send him back down? You think if they bring him up, he will stick around?
No, absolutely not. Okay. I think he's going to get a chance he's going to get the chance Cramarosa and Shaw got next for a role player that Minnesota doesn't have access to, likely because of injury or, illness or something like that. He's going to get the 2:00 in the afternoon call that he needs to be in St. Paul by 5. That's when he's going to get his chance to, to show him what they can do at that level. He'd be my long shot right now. Yeah.
Okay. We'll have to keep an eye on that for sure.
Not just because he's a cousin Bulldog.
Yeah. Okay. That gives a little extra weight to it for sure.
You know me.
I'm sure it does. Have you felt like, Billy G obviously is doing a good job and we all love him here in Minnesota, but do you feel like replacing Fiala this year, has that came through? Has that been tough? You think you wish he was still here, or like, what's your thoughts?
For sure, my hockey buddy Mafia was not always on Billy G's ship when Kevin Fiala got shipped out. There was a lot of people who went like, what in the HE double hockey sticks are you doing there, BG? But you know what? Billy Guerin, he has been around a moonshot, and he's been in the Pittsburgh Penguins organization. He's won as a player. He's won as a manager. The tough thing, to my opinion, is the patience that the general managers, not only in hockey, but, in baseball, NBA basketball, NFL football, who you drafting, when are they going to be ready? When can they be ready? What do you got for salary cap? I mean, that's a nightmare job. I can't even remember what your original question is, but I think what you're seeing, and we've been talking most of this podcast, Hot Dish Sports here, about the strength of the Wild's number one affiliate, the Des Moines, Iowa Wild, the Baby Wild, as a lot of people
Yeah.
call them. And I think that fits right into Bill Guerin's game plan too. You remember the Twins when they were kind of rebuilding, the Minnesota Twins? They were rebuilding, but they were doing almost all of their rebuilding and strengthening and coring from their top minor league baseball team. And then came the Herbecks, and then came the Gaettis, and then came, the Pucketts. And all of a sudden they had a nucleus. I'm not saying this is that spectacular. I'm not saying the Wild are going to, dance to a Stanley Cup, immediately because of it. But I think Bill Guerin's formula is to build from within, keep your culture great in the organization, pick off a Matt Zuccarello, pick off, some free agents that enhance you. Maybe make a bid at playoff time if you think you're missing that one player. I like his patience, and I know a lot of people don't. But this isn't just a instant thing. Right. Plug this guy in, grab that guy, do that. There's so many layers that prohibit, a fan's impulsiveness to a professional general manager's patience and perseverance and knowledge, quite frankly.
Yeah, and what I think Billy G's done well too is I think there was many years where it felt like the Wild were rebuilding, even though we weren't. It just, we didn't actually do the full dive, and not that we're doing that now, but we at least are building while still winning, still putting a good product out there, still filling the entire X. So I'm excited to see where the next few years take us. And speaking of Billy G, we got Pittsburgh coming up, we got Nashville coming up, we got Seattle. And it's kind of weird to say it, but Seattle is actually the toughest opponent that we have to face out of those three teams. They're on a 5-game win streak right now.
And I'm still trying to figure out what a Kraken is, although I did Google it. I'm Freddie Flintstone when it comes to technology, and this is my first podcast, by the way. Great to be on Hot Dish Sports. Hey, I think what did you say? They're 5-0. They're on a mini roll. They beat Minnesota. They shut Minnesota out here 4-0 at the X last week. So, obviously, the last game of a West Coast road trip before I think they come home for one, and then I think they hit the road. But this is a big game, obviously, tonight. Little shout-out for the former UMD Bulldog on Seattle and former Wild Brett Soucy. Had a good game in here last time. But Seattle's formidable, and you talked about the Nashvilles and the Seattles. You didn't mention Las Vegas, but the reason I'm mentioning them, you talked about Pittsburgh, but just to put Las Vegas in there, expansion teams, hey, they get 30 pretty good players when you expand. And so this isn't like, even Minnesota back in 2000, you get some players, but these expansion teams, they don't start from ground zero. And like you said, the Kraken are 5-0, and they're a force. How long they remain a force, we'll see. But look what Las Vegas did, just within the last year or two here. They were going further than the Minnesota Wild ever were in the playoffs, and I think they've been in the league, a tenth of the time. Oh, yeah, if even. Yeah, it's crazy. Do you have any kind of end-of-season predictions or expectations for the Wild this year in 2022, 2022, 2023? I'm not a big predictions guy, Obi. I'm a more... I think NHL. I think all seasons are built into quarters. What do we know a quarter way in? What do we know a half way in? Where are we at 3 quarters? What are we going to do? I expect the Wild, to be in the playoff hunt. I know it's going to be very disappointing to the guy we just spent a lot of time talking about, Bill Guerin, if they're not. And I think I'm a big believer in this coaching staff. I think Dean Evison, he's a fair hockey coach. He rewards people accordingly, and not just because of the contract size. I think they make the playoffs, and I think the expectation is that they, make it another round or two into the playoffs. And when you look at who's been standing in their way lately, let's talk about a team in the bottom of the division right now, in the bottom of the conference, not the conference, but the division, the St. Louis Blues. I mean, I think they're 0-8, or last time I checked, had lost their last 7 or 8 in a row. And
they're off to a slow start.
Who's going to be that roadblock for the Wild? Well, probably not going to be the Blues. So that bodes well. You always got Colorado. I mean, let's face it, tough division. Chicago's relevant right now. Love Al Stalock, another UMD Bulldog, but
there's a lot of them coming up on this podcast today.
And no disrespect to Al, yeah, we'll get him. No disrespect. I don't think you'll see Chicago there. So with Chicago and the Blues, Nashville would be pretty good. Nashville was always tough round opponent for the Wild. I don't know. I think if they're close to making the playoffs, they'll get in the playoffs. And if I did have to predict, they're due to win another round or two. And I think, quite frankly, we'll need to in some cases in terms of employment for, some players and personnel to let's go, right? Yeah,
for sure, because they've got some expectations. Obviously, people around the state. You got Kirill on the team, Dolla Bill Kirill. You got to win with him when you've got guys like that.
And that window, as you know, you've been around sports all your life. That window is so short to build around a franchise player. It's shorter than you think it is. And, the Brodins, the Zuccarellos, they're not getting any younger. Talbot, not Talbot, didn't talk about Talbot, but,
Fleury.
Speaking of Billy G, was it a great move to trade Talbot and grab Philip Gustafson? At one point, Gustafson was 0-3.
Got his first win last couple nights ago.
Won the other night. So I digress, but I think what I was saying is the window to win with the talent they have is very, very short. And the pressure's on. Yeah,
for sure. Well, I'm hoping that they make it to the playoffs. I will definitely be at a game this year if they get there. Last year I had tickets to Game 7. They didn't make it that far, so those evaporated.
It was well documented. You texted me every other night. So
I know. As much as I was hoping, in my mind, I was like, I'll buy Game 7 tickets. That way they win before Game 7, and then I'll buy tickets to the next round. And if they make it to Game 7, well, then I get to go to an epic game at home. But unfortunately, they lost before we even got there. So what are you going to do? But
I know you're a hockey guy. That's why it's so fun hanging out with you, and you're a knowledgeable hockey guy. And you played this game and you understand this game. You've been around this game at a high level in media, as have I. And that gives us that look to kind of share with our viewers here to say it's not as easy as it looks, and people are trying. I think one of the great misnomers in fandom is, come on, man, let's go. Well, do you actually think the players in the organization and the front office staff actually want things going the way they do when things are going bad? It's pressure like you've never seen before. So you just hope that people deliver. And I'm a big guy in saying drivers and passengers. At the end of the season, if the Wild have more drivers than they do passengers on the ice, they'll be in good shape to go longer and deeper than they have in a long, long time.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it, and hopefully we get to that point. I definitely didn't play hockey at a high level. Let's make that clear. But I've been around hockey my whole life. I've played it, obviously. But man,
well, I'm saying, but you've been around the pro hockey scene with cameras in your hand.
That's true.
And storytelling, and you can cut that. You've seen tension that you can cut with a knife at the pro level and colleges level. It's a grind, and I think that's the one thing you'd love to tell people who just want things. Let's turn it around and let's win 10 in a row. Oh, okay. Let's start today. Well, hopefully we start that tonight against Seattle. And there you go.
I appreciate you coming on, Gis, and talking Wild. We'll do it again soon, obviously, for sure. And thanks for tuning in, everybody. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment. If you have any comments for Eric, we'll answer them next time.
I have a comment for you. Nice Movember stash. I love it. Way to go.
It's slowly coming in. This is like a teenager Cole stash. This is laziness more than it is an attempt at a Movember.
Man. It's cancer awareness in the NHL. I love it. Way to go. In fact, I shouldn't have brought it up because I'm lacking one. But I'm going to see next time I see you, I'm going to see where that Movember stash is. Keep her going. And thanks for having me.
Right. There you go. We'll record next week after a few of these games. Hopefully a few wins, and we'll see how our mustaches are looking. Follow us online. Follow us on Twitter. We live tweet sometimes during the games. Hot Dish Sports. Go Wild. Peace.